Deck building and roguelike often go hand in hand nowadays. Throw in the fact that these games usually start out in early access, you get a fairly oversaturated genre. This brings us to today's early access title Breachway, which is currently being developed by Edgeflow Studios and published by Hooded Horse. Hooded Horse is always an intriguing publisher for me given their very stellar track record in early access. And speaking of Hooded Horse, they once again provided me with a free code to this sci-fi deck builder. While I do appreciate the free code, it will not deter me from a fair and honest review. Sounds good? Let's begin. So when you start the game, you can pick to just get right into the gameplay or the prologue, which is the tutorial for this game. The tutorial / prologue does a pretty good job of what you should expect in the overall gameplay flow. Honestly, this game isn't very complex and you can figure it out pretty quickly even without the tutorial, but the inclusion is still much appreciated. Also like that this is optional, meaning you can skip this tutorial and the prologue if you're just not a fan of it. Every run basically starts out like this. You pick the ship that you are going to pilot, and you also pick the additional perks that you will want for the run. At first, you're only going to have one ship unlocked and one additional perk to select. Ships and perks are unlocked when completing certain tasks, such as reaching a certain area with the ship, purchasing a certain amount of upgrades, etc, etc. It's a tried and true concept, but currently there's only 4 ships and 8 perks to unlock, making it very short on content at the moment. You can, if you really wanted to, you can probably unlock everything within a handful of hours. So once you select your ship and proceed with your perks, you begin at the first sector map. The map stays the same between each playthrough, although what you will encounter in each sector is random depending on a variety of factors. One of them in particular that you can see is the diplomacy of factions being one of them, and that is determined by the ship that you have chosen as well as the actions that you take within your playthrough. A majority of the time you will be led into combat, but often other times you'll have a random event to participate in. This could be something as getting more fuel, seeing somebody, maybe accepting a side mission, etc, etc. We'll talk about more of that stuff later on. The first thing though is I want to talk about the combat and the battles in general, which take up a majority of the game. So the battles play out in a turn-based manner, and depending on the cards and resources you have in hand will determine what cards can be played during your turn. You have 3 resource points, and that's ordnance, energy, and mass. And these points are generated depending on how many radiator points are assigned to each resource. So from here you pick the card that you want to use. The cards that are drawn depend on your equipment and what cards are currently assigned to them. The starting ship here starts with a pulse laser, which allows me to target the enemy equipment, which is really crucial since I can disable shields from being regenerated or shoot the weapons, preventing them from attacking. Commander skills can also be used here by spending commander points, which is a side resource. So examples of some of these commander skills include granting instant shields, generating a certain amount of resources, or increasing attack temporarily. Overall, it's a very good and fun system here. It's very easy to learn, but it is hard to master. At the end of each sector, you'll have a boss battle to go through, and these ships will have a higher health and better equipment than anything you faced prior. At first, when you first encounter them, they can feel a bit overtuned, but I recommend to just stick with the strategies that I've mentioned. Destroy the equipment, use your commander skills when appropriate, and that should hopefully get you through. The only time I found this game to be a bit too challenging, because this game is overall on the more challenging side, was when using the other ships. I expected them to be stronger than the starting ship as a reason to unlock them, but many of them appear to be weaker so far. The second ship can't target specific equipment with the flat cannon, and shield cards are also very lackluster and need to be improved at first. The third ship doesn't even have the ability to raise shields during the fight. It has no shield equipment and instead opts for like a hacking maneuver, which is an interesting playthrough, but it overall feels weaker than the first ship. It makes fights very challenging, especially when you face very offensively focused ships, as you only have so much hull to take damage with. A rebalancing will be needed, and my suggestion personally would be to increase the overall hull of the third ship to compensate for its initial lack of shield cards. And outside of combat, there are random events. There are also going to be stations that you can dock at, and these are usually off the main path, and going off the main path will take fuel to reach them, and that's noted by the tan colored lines on the map. If you're friendly enough with the faction, you can dock at their station and repair your ship, along with purchasing equipment and sub-equipment to use. These are almost essential to stop at, especially before getting to the end of the sector and meeting the boss. I only wish though that these had the ability to recruit additional crew members here, because the only way I found to get additional crew members is through finding escape pods on the map. And honestly, that's really it in terms of game flow. My biggest issue currently is what I mentioned prior, and that's a lack of content. There's currently only 2 sectors to go through, which can be done within a few hours if you get lucky with the RNG and the right equipment. The random events also repeat very frequently in repeat playthroughs, meaning you'll more than often see the same thing over and over again. But thankfully, there are already patches that have been addressed to address some of these issues, and more patches and obviously major updates are going to be on the way. Hooded Horse, like I said, usually does a great job of making sure early access titles are ready for prime time, so definitely keep your eye on this one. So presentation wise, I do like the cel shaded graphics. Music is whatever though at this point, and it doesn't strike me as anything interesting. Really just serves as background points to get us through. I also haven't really ran into any glitches myself, although I have read that some players have reported that commander skills are not working as intended, and I'm expecting that to be addressed as soon as possible. So overall, and this is a pretty short review, but I just can't recommend Breachway at this time, but I will recommend keeping an eye on this one, either as a wish list or just following it normally like you'd follow anything. Despite the fairly fun combat and ship customization, I just believe there's not enough content to keep players invested for long. It's at 20 bucks right now, which I just feel like there's better roguelikes and deck builders out there. Gordian Quest and FTL come to mind. Gordian Quest mainly for its deck building, and FTL for its sci-fi elements. Obviously there's a flood of roguelikes out there and other deck builders that I'm not going to mention, but you can definitely take them, and some that have been on the market for years at this point, more polished products. But still, I am confident of the progress so far due to the many updates that the game has already received within the first week of release. So I'd say keep your eye on this one and see where this goes. So thank you all for watching. As always, if you have any other early access titles you want me to take a look at, please let me know. And as always, this is Powerhouse signing off.